Welcome back to Unmuted Nation and another edition of the Cabinet. Today, joining me in the Cabinet as we talk about election 2020, which is the conversation not enough of us are having. The people that I think should be at the forefront of the conversation obviously aren't having it either. And we are continuing our discussion just on Black Lives Matter and how a supposed movement has been accosted by some other causes. So joining me today, Kia and Jalisa, welcome to Unmuted Nation.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Welcome back to both of you. So tons of things going on with election 2020. I don't know. I always like to ask how people are feeling. If you feel like and interesting, let me set the stage for that, right? I'm asking how people are feeling, and a lot of the conversations, especially that I'm having with younger voters, and this is their first time, they are just totally in the space of realizing that adulthood is not what they thought it was, and the options that are on the table just don't add up. And so I did a lot of explaining last week about how that works, and that America has always had the same options. The same options have always been on the table. It's always been old and white. Those have been your options. 43 times, those were the only options, and only once did those options change. And I think people being alive, I think I'll say this, and this is my personal thought. No research went into this. I'm not citing facts or at all, but I think that seasoned adults and seasoned people, people that have seasoned the earth for quite some time, that have been here for a while, are really, really discounting the effects of technology and how active younger people actually are. Over the weekend, Donald Trump said that he was going to ban TikTok, which, you know, anybody that lives here knows that this isn't China. You really have no power. Like, you don't run the internet. You don't own the internet. First of all, it belongs to Al Gore, first and foremost. and secondly, like, you really, and my shock was the people responding to his antic, like, even his claim that he could do that, like, oh my God, he's gonna cancel. Like, he's not, because he can't. And but what I'm getting at is, I don't think that, like, he's clearly ignoring what happened at the only real rally that he's had in Tulsa, and what Generation Z did, and limited the attendance. And I think the threat to ban a network that they are using en masse is really going to put you in jeopardy for what they will do. They will show up, and I'm going to say that people aren't realizing it, and it's like and before I get into that, because I can go deep with it. I was already getting started. When you think election 2020, how are you feeling? Like, just with, like, where are you, Kia? Like, when you think?
I'm exhausted. I've been thinking a lot about the John Lewis quote, "Be hopeful, be optimistic, don't get lost in a sea of despair." And that is what is grounding me now, because you can become overwhelmed, especially when it seems like the Democrats and Joe Biden just aren't leaning into this moment the way I would hope that they were. They're just being a lot more conservative, not progressive enough for my likings. I'm really nervous about this VP pick and what will happen with that. But I'm just trying to stay optimistic and knowing, like, we are in the political moment of our lifetimes, and just really
of our lifetime, like,
yes,
of our lifetime.
And just really leaning into doing the work to make this moment all that it can be.
Okay, good thoughts, Jalisa. When you think election 2020, where are you? What do you think?
Well, as a second-time voter, still kind of confused, like the first time, actually.
Jalisa, I can't hear you. I don't know what's going on. Let's see. We'll try to come back to Jalisa because I don't know if there's a sound problem. We'll come right back. I think a lot of people are really, really indifferent with where we are for election 2020. And I think the main thing that I would say, and I said this over the weekend, I'm not a Republican strategist in any way. I don't claim to be, but I think that they should really be paying attention. And what I've been saying, I've kind of taken up the platform of telling people that you are qualified to do anything you want in this country. All you need to be is a citizen. And so many people are sitting back and like, well, how do we change this? How do we change this? And bitching and doing all these different things. And really, if you get up and go run for your local council, whether it's a school board, your city council, the mayor, and in so many places that these cities have broken off from larger cities and created these smaller cities, they're not expecting you to put your name in the hat. And so the confusion often lies in people thinking that they have to win over vote people that have already voted. But there are so many people that don't vote at all. Right. And what people don't realize is if you win those people, you win. Because you don't have to change the minds. And so I think that's why we have to pay attention to younger people and younger voters right now, because we are thinking about people that have been seasoned and been on this planet and have been voting for the last 30, 40 years and haven't thought 1 second about these 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. And it's really because traditionally those people have not voted.
Right.
Technology has brought us all closer together. And so I remember being 18 and real. I mean, it was always it was much different, but George Bush was in office, and so there was an awareness there, but there was no constant awareness. There was no way to be constantly aware of what was going on. Right now, the president lives on Twitter, and so does everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that we have to keep in mind when it comes to, do you think, before we jump into more of my speculation, are you and your friends having conversations about this, Kia? Like what, with the nerves?
Yes, absolutely. Conversations from like all aspects of this. And I think like to lean into what you just said, I think one of the failures of the Democratic Party has been to chase after these middle of the road white voters instead of leaning into the unregistered, the new voters, the blacker and browner demographics. Because I mean, just if you look at statistics from past elections, majority of white folks have, I don't think, ever voted Democratic as a majority in my lifetime. So to chase those votes instead of leaning into these people who you have the power to build a coalition with, it makes more. I think it has proven to be a losing strategy.
Well, no, I think I totally agree with you. I think that it's baseless and also confusing, right? We sit and we think about, like, you see what's happened. There were so many voices that were in the mix initially, like so many different voices. Like, where the hell is Mike Bloomberg and your money? Well, where's your money, Mike? And what are you doing with it? Like, where is Mike? And all of the voices that were running, I also feel like you have a responsibility. If you jumped into this fight initially and you were one of the voices that was that wanted to be president, you also have a responsibility. Now, you shouldn't be silent. You should be, even if Joe hasn't selected you as an aide, you should be offering advice, unsolicited. And you should be, because I think I don't know. I think so much. And I think my level of frustration with the lack of focus on what's happening. And while we are watching, and there are so many distractions. When I think about how unfocused we've become, and sure, we're in a global pandemic that most people are ignoring. But going back to what I said to you, probably the last time you were here, people take their cues from leadership, whether they supported them or not.
Yes.
So what we are seeing, the widespread lack of mask wearing, it's totally because leaders have refused to engage.
Yes.
And now these same leaders don't want to take any responsibility, which is extremely confusing and concerning to me. Do you think, where do you think we could improve? And Jalisa, I'm going to come back to you and ask you the same question.
I think what we have to do is we have to have stronger community leadership. We have to have leaders who look like us, who live like us, to step in when our national and state leaders are failing us. And we have to support them. I think I look at like what's happened in Atlanta, where the mayor and the governor can't agree on anything, and you have people. I actually just got off a call about this, where people are like, "Why do we have to listen to the mayor and not the governor?" And just not understanding the difference between being in an urban area with coronavirus and being in a rural or suburban area with coronavirus, and how that affects the communities different. And not wanting to listen to a Black woman who is like making the decision. So I think we really, and when I say local leaders, I'm not even just talking about mayors. I'm talking about people in your neighborhood, people at grassroots organizations who you trust to advise you on things, especially when our politicians can't agree and make safe decisions for us.
I totally agree. Jalisa, what are your are you and your friends talking about this upcoming election and just what to do?
Honestly, no, actually. Sometimes I might bring up the election and just some things that are political, but as far as my generation goes, and I wouldn't even say my entire generation, but most of us only see the Trump versus whoever. It's not even Trump versus Biden. It's just Trump versus whoever. Let's just get Trump out of office. No one really cares who's on the ballot. I feel like my generation really isn't doing as much research as we should be doing. But then again, like in Dallas, for example, the Democratic polls, they're just uninspiring. So my generation just kind of feels like whoever is in office, as long as it's not Trump, we don't care about it. And that's just the wrong way to look at politics as a whole.
Well, I think it's the only frame of reference that your generation has. And so I think going back to people ignoring your generation, would you say that the majority of people that you know are aware that or feel like Trump has to go?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know anybody that's in my generation, unless they're just born inside of a Make America Great Again family, that are like, let's go Trump. Nobody. Like, everyone wants him out. So if that means we have to vote for Joe Biden, which we really don't want to, we have to do it.
I think you saying that is actually convincing enough for me, because I know people that do support him and people that would stand behind him. Kia, you probably do as well.
Yeah.
To talk to somebody that lives in a generation that doesn't know anyone, that says a lot. I think that's the point that I've been trying to make, that people aren't paying attention to this generation that has really influenced more than we want to acknowledge. And one thing I'll point out is that I had a conversation with my sister, and it kind of went back to when the stimulus checks came out. And she called me and she was so shocked that she got one. And I was like, you're an American. You are a citizen, and you are due this money, and you will make sure if you didn't get it, then you and I will be having another conversation, because she's in her early 20s, thinking that she's still not able to participate in this democracy that she's a part of. And I also believe that that's part of the conditioning. I think that the tide starts to change when we put effort into educating our own, which is part of the reason why we know we will see more widespread voter suppression, because the reason that it happens anyway is because you're able to do whatever you want to people that don't have any education, or when people don't know what's going on. So when you don't realize, this is the same reason that I took up the platform of telling people to vote. You don't need a degree to run for House of Representatives or for the Senate. And while some of these things on paper may make you look better to some people, you just being an average Joe, which is what the Constitution asks for anyway, is more appealing to a lot of people. And so I think, and what I hope and what I desire and what I'm going to start chasing is that we start seeing these young people running for things. And you, as old people, we may be critics, like, you're not going to do this right, you're not going to do this right. They're going to do something. Mm-hmm. They're going to do something, and I think that's the major difference. Switching gears a little bit, and there's so much, and I'll try to get everything in if possible. We've talked Black Lives Matter on not just in the cabinet, but on the show often, and I think that lately there's been so much, I guess, if you're listening to multiple sides of the conversation, which I think you should be if you want to be effective in the way that you deliver, there has been confusion. And I want to talk about the not confusion for a specific race of people that chooses to be ignorant on a topic, but confusion within intra-racially. So I'll talk within Black culture, of people choosing not to support. And let me ask a question first before I get into people and the choices and decisions that they're making based on false or incorrect information. What is confusing about the 3 words Black Lives Matter? Like, I just want, what is confusing?
So years ago on Twitter, we were having a conversation and someone pointed out how white people don't like to be white because white people have always been a norm. So to them, they don't like to be called white. I'm sorry, because they've always been the norm. So they've never had to have an adjective in front of their name. And I think Black Lives Matter, it reinforces some of that. Like it calls to the carpet your privilege, the fact that you've been silent to this. It makes you uncomfortable because it makes you aware of your whiteness. And I mean, let's be real, some people are just racist and they don't think that Black Lives Matter. So just that phrase makes people uncomfortable because it calls to their conscience so many things that they've just tried to ignore about themselves and our society.
Jalisa, what are your thoughts? Why do you think Black Lives Matter seems to be confusing to people?
I don't think it's confusing at all. I think because of white people's privilege, what comes with privilege is being able to ignore things or making things seem like they're not as big as they really are. That comes with privilege. They carry that with them every day. And just like he was just saying, the uncomfortableness, it causes the, it's whatever, and I have conversations with my white counterparts. Like I said, I'm from DC, so I'm from a very diverse area. I have a lot of different friends. And even some of my white friends are like, yeah, but how doesn't all lives matter? Like, I just don't get how you guys are saying that just y'all matter. And it's like, we're not saying just we matter, but you also know that we are the only ones in the streets getting killed every single day. So it's not like we don't think that anybody else, you know what? I'm not even going to get to it. We don't have to explain that Black Lives Matter. Everyone knows why.
I understand you being there because I have made the deliberate decision. First of all, I don't want to explain it to anybody else. I think I said on this platform that I won't be explaining Black Lives Matter to a no damn body any further because there's no reason for you to have the misunderstanding. So I think, and I got to go back to the lack of education, which someone told me to stop saying that because I'm making people feel stupid. I don't think anybody should feel stupid for not knowing something. I think, and I really abhor people that make others feel stupid for them not knowing, but I also think that you should make it your business to know certain things. And we know that history will tell us, the research will tell us that people don't like to learn new things. That's part of it. However, Black lives aren't new. Black people have been here. And so there should not really be confusion between the movement and a said organization. And especially when you're making the deliberate choice to ignore what we are telling you that it means. Like when you make the constant decision and the deliberate decision to say, oh no, this doesn't mean this. It means, or there, but it's so easy to attack one group of people that is ignoring it. I did want to talk a little intra-racially, because I think what I've seen, and it's been alarming to me. So there are actually multiple organizations that are carrying the name Black Lives Matter, which is in this country, it's easy to do. But I have seen outrage in one specific, and Jalisa, you kind of hit the nail on the head when we have to say Black lives, because these are the ones that if we don't even need a microscope to see that they are disproportionately at risk for everything. But this movement was created specifically to address brutality and rogue vigilantes and people that go without being prosecuted for crimes against Black lives. So I'm going to share a scenario with you guys, and I want to you guys will kind of see where I'm going with this. So I saw a couple of posts from our own people that said, did you guys know that the Black Lives Matter organization has in their bylaws? And I saw this being reposted and retweeted, that they are intent on elevating the voices of Black trans lives in this fight. And I saw our own having an issue with the elevation and the equating of these lives, which I found very problematic. And history also tells you that if I find it problematic, I'm not going to shut up about it. So these people specifically saw issue and started saying, I don't feel the need to include, and not wanting to say that these voices shouldn't be elevated, but why should we include them? Because all Black lives matter.
So they did the same thing that white people are doing,
but couldn't see it.
So one of my foundational values is, if you organize for the most marginalized people in society, everyone else will be taken care of.
Let me give you your props on that as well, because the number of times since you said that here on the cabinet that I have regurgitated that, repeated that, and I think my mom is repeating it because I said it to her, and she was like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's good," because it's real.
Civil rights don't trickle down. You have to go to the margins and make the circle wide enough to include everyone. So if it makes us uncomfortable to say that we are prioritizing trans Black lives, our movement is messed up. I almost said another word, but it's messed up. And what you see people leaning into their own normativity, patriarchy, and like their cis heteronormativity, and doing the same power and oppression games that white people do to Black folks. And I think it does us a great justice to not just look at racism, but look at power and oppression dynamics so that we won't replicate them in our fight for freedom. Because unless we all can be free, none of us are free.
Well said. And Jalisa, I'm going to go to you in a second, but I think even the dismantling of systems does not stop with white supremacy.
It doesn't.
It goes further into systems of religion that have taught oppression and regurgitated oppression and taken away from people human rights. That same system has to be dismantled. That's an entirely different show. But I had some sort of an epiphany over the weekend, even about religion and the lies that it has peddled into our community, to the point to where so many times we don't even believe on our own because we rely on false narratives, things that may not even be true. But to not equate these lives, and my response to every time I've seen it, which has been off-putting to people, my response each time was, we must live lives that are at risk. that people are ignoring. And so Black trans lives, these are lives that are constantly at risk, and people are still ignoring the stories. They're not sharing the stories. They're not vocal or outraged about these stories, but you want vocal. And part of my own evolution, I haven't always been as vocal. I've always been vocal for everybody, right? But I can own the fact that I haven't been as vocal on certain issues based on my own lack of education.
Yes.
So as I've educated myself and I found myself becoming more passionate just about, and you call yourself for the people, you call yourself passionate for people, then be for people.
Yes.
And I almost said a bunch of expletives with that. But I'll leave that alone. Jalisa, when you see people kind of devaluing or putting a constraints on a movement like Black Lives Matter, how does that make you feel?
Well, I want to touch back on Black trans lives, because even in the entertainment industry, for example, when Megan Thee Stallion got shot by Tory Lanez, and it became a joke, because I feel like it became a joke, for one, because she wasn't dead, right? Second, a whole bunch of things started piling up on Twitter. First of all, no, Twitter is factual sometimes, but sometimes people just go on there and love to talk. They're like, oh, Megan Thee Stallion, she used to be a man, making up stuff to justify Tory Lanez shooting her. Just that joke alone lets us know that the Black community, we're only together in certain things, but we decide to divide each other from the trans community. And that, I
think that's what you said there is a key factor that we often ignore, but it's worth repeating. It bears repeating. We make the decision to decide to divide. Like this is a constant decision that some of us are making. And while we're not monolithic, we're not, as Black people, we are there. We can do more than one thing. We can have more than one movement, which we should. We should be having more than one conversation. But we should, with one voice, condemn those that are intent on dividing. And so I think part of there have always been bullying tactics against people that are oppressed. And I think until we bully the oppressors, we're going to continue to see this. Like, you start to make those people feel small for marginalizing different things that because it's often done when people don't understand, or they've been taught to be fearful, which is often done in our culture by religion as well, which
is straight facts.
It's just I don't have it like I want it, but it is so frustrating to me. I guess I wonder, how do we get past this? Because I think we can talk about the issue, we can bring the issue to the forefront, but what does it take? Like, let's say you're watching this or you're listening to this and you're like, you know what? I don't know a damn thing about trans lives. You're sitting there, and some people literally within the conversation, they don't participate in the conversation. They don't speak out against the oppression because they don't understand or they haven't gotten any education. But there's literally people that will see this, listen to this, and say, well, I still don't know anything about them. And so I don't need, but there are tons of people that would advocate for you that don't know a damn thing about you.
Right.
But so how do we grow? That's where do we go?
Well, just like how we try to guide non-Blacks to, for example, Netflix having a whole column of Black Lives Matter movies, or whatever the case may be. I see people on Twitter dropping Google Drives of information about the slave trade and whatnot. We can do the same things with. It's not like there aren't trans informations online. Just how we badger people about educating themselves, we can do the same thing. Disclosures on Netflix, that's a whole hour and 30 minutes of trying to understand the average day of a trans woman or a trans man. Just like we say, it only takes 30 minutes to an hour to learn about X, Y, and Z, 1, 2, 3. And then also lighting on what Kia said earlier, having community leaders in your community that's outside of the Senate and the government and the mayor is important, but also having the community actually listening and wanting those people to lead them is very important. And we're so easily distracted The Black Lives Matter movement to me didn't even last as long as it should have. To me, I feel like we didn't go as hard as we really should have. And that kind of thing is just kind of disheartening because we let the distractions come and take us away from those important things.
I have a thought about that. Kia, what do you think?
I think it's what Jalisa said, like a lean into, like we have at our fingertips all of the information. Disclosure is an amazing documentary that gives you an understanding of how transgenders people's lives. The Human Rights Campaign, Transgender Law Center, the National Center for Transgender Issues. Like there are organizations who are out here educating and telling these stories. It's our job to go to them, to sign up for their email list, to listen and to learn, and to just, if nothing else, respect people's humanity and respect their stories. Stop talking over people. When you don't understand something, stop pushing back and just listen and digest what they're saying about their experiences. Because that's what we want white people to do when we talk about racism. We don't want them to tell us, well, that's not my experience with the police. We want them to sit and listen and realize that because we navigate the world differently, our experiences are different. So you have to give validity to people who are sharing their experience.
I agree 100%. And I think part of the problem that we find sometimes is that people are resistant, and they remain in spaces that keep them comfortable. So for too long, I think we have not encouraged continuing education. And I say that I'm not talking about schools, I'm not talking about colleges, I'm not even talking about certification or training programs, but things change. And part of the reason why we have such a huge disconnect generationally is because not only do we stop educating, but we stop listening.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have conversations. And so when there's a huge disconnect between somebody that's 20, and this is also part of the problem, people that are 20 and people that are 80 are voting in the same election. And they're thinking about they're living different lives. They have totally different experiences. And while you would expect somebody that's 80 to have had so many experiences that they're understanding of where this 20-year-old may be, oftentimes they're not. Because they don't talk to anybody that's that age. And people, and this is like, there's learning that we can all do. Even you can find yourself talking at a grandparent because you think they don't understand. Or you're talking at them because you feel like you put them in a grandparent category, and their thoughts won't evolve. They're set in stone, and sometimes, many times they are. But you would be surprised if you start having those conversations with people and expanding their thought of understanding. I think about when all the things started happening that we didn't ask for. They said they were going to change the name of Aunt Jemima. And I remember talking to my grandmother, and she was like, well, I never thought they'd do that. I mean, she was really like, it's been the same, and when I started talking to her and kind of educating, because even when it came to Juneteenth, my mother was very intent on teaching me Black history. So I understood it. But my grandmother, who my mother comes from, was like, I never heard about it until your mama told me about it. And she's like, it is the conditioning is such that there that if we don't have these conversations, I don't think we're gonna come out of this place. And I'm fearful that culturally we've gotten so landlocked into these positions, into these viewpoints, that we are, and I find it's difficult. We are, and you don't have to be moved, but you should be willing to have the conversation. I find myself even with, because you have to, a lot of us don't have the conversation that we don't know what we're up against. And so when you're talking to people that believe differently in our own community, I'm not talking about another community, then you have to understand what type of information they've been consuming. When it comes to, we understand that people don't like to relearn. So if you learned in 1951 that there were two genders, that's what you know. And everything else seems new. And and I do understand. I feel like the reason we need to have the conversation, because the three of us can sit here on this platform and say the education's out there. You can go look it up. And sometimes somebody needs to tell them gently, because every time someone asks them to look it up, they're going off on them like it's something they should know. Mm-hmm. And I think if we're not having the conversations, reminding each other that yes, we can advocate, but we also must educate, because when you're advocating without educating, then you are leaving groups of people out that don't know this information, and they're not willing. And so I think, and I've talked about this before, but I think we can push for everything, but simultaneously we got to push for education. I think that's just where we are. There's some people that will never change. But then aside from educating, there are people that are willfully ignorant, and we got to deal with that.
We have to normalize not knowing, unlearning, and learning new information. And I think if we can make that normal so that people understand that comes with uncomfortableness, and it comes with, oh, I messed this up really bad, and the regret and the pain that comes with realizing that, then we can make progress. But we have to make those feelings normal, and teach people how to sit in that uncomfortableness when you've been wrong, or when you didn't know something, or when you realize you could have done something better.
And we haven't normalized that at all. Go ahead, Jalisa.
It can be normal, but I feel like it's more effective. Maybe just for my generation personally, it's more effective when you compare. Like when Kia said, just how white people choose to not understand, that's not how I go about life. So I can't even relate to that conversation, versus a heterosexual Black man saying, oh, I found out he was really a man, I'll shoot him dead right now. Mm-hmm. That's literally the same thing. So when you compare those things, you give Black people that perspective that we've never been in before. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I was wrong. That's kind of effed up. So yeah, that's how I kind of try to educate my friends. I don't just give them the information. I like to compare, to let them know, like, are you going to be different? Are you going to be a part of the change? Or you're going to do the same thing that the white people are doing to us?
Well, I think, and this is my own experience, I don't think people realize that. They sometimes they choose not to realize that, or they don't accept the fact that they are doing the same thing. But I offer that sometimes that refusal to accept is just a fear of being educated, and a fear of admitting ignorance, which people don't like to feel ignorant. And, there's so much here. I can keep going. What I do want to do is keep having the conversation about conversation. And I think we're just not talking to each other. And I think that Jalisa, I wanted to get back to a point that you made that you feel like we didn't go as hard as we should have. I agree with that in so many ways. I think, though, that we are in a different place. And I think it took me some time to kind of step back and think about what I mean when I say we're in a different place. And people are like, some people say we're past marching and all of that. I think all of it matters. I think all of it has a time and all of it has a place. What I do believe is that we are much smarter and we are much more resourceful. And as usual, we always use our resources better, more masterfully, and the skill enhances that. And so I think the same skills, the same wit that we have, and sometimes, like the attacks on the stallion were totally uncalled for and inappropriate, but a mirror of our culture, and of what our culture does in every situation. And it's the way that we cope with pain, but it's also in so many ways, I think, a way that we can lead. And I don't think that we've chosen to lead by using that same wit that we apply to everything else. Like if we really got skillful, and because we respond to skill, that if there's anything that we respond to skill and talent, we're a culture that loves to see it and we love to stand behind it. And I feel like, and I believe we're going to see that. I just believe that the revolution comes silently, and it comes from people that are making moves when nobody's paying attention. And so my final last words on this, we could talk all day. Kia, what are your last words here?
Be okay with being uncomfortable, and change does not just happen. We have to do the work. So like figure out, I think one thing that's really important, going back to this political moment, is we like to talk about politics or our involvement in democracy as just voting. And I think we have to be active 365 days a year. So really educating yourself on the different ways to be engaged to protect and advance democracy and civil rights every day of the year. And I think part of that is just finding a political home, an organization who is doing the work that aligns with your values, who you can work with to make progress happen.
Love that. Love that. Jalisa, your final words.
I'm going to end with a John Lewis excerpt when he said, Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was 14 when he died and I was 15. And that's when I realized it could have easily been me. John Lewis took his last breath fighting for Black lives. And I feel like just because we're in a time where everyone's more relaxed and everyone kind of just is living their life, you don't have to work too hard to fight for your life and for others' Black lives. There's always work to be done. And if you don't do it, who will?
Great words. And I couldn't have said it any better. Ladies, as always, thank you for coming through the cabinet. As always, I hope that you'll come back. And these conversations must continue. They must continue. More Unmuted Nation continues after this break. What do you think? Unmuted Nation on Twitter and Instagram. We'll be back after this. Stay with us.